I'm accused of talking quite a lot about land by Judge Hlope. Do I talk a lot about land? Welcome to Citizen Concerned. Please like, repost and share this video, subscribe to the channel, and like we always say, beware of the comrades. The EFF had Judge Hlope on their YouTube channel and asked him to address people who ask certain questions about land. And for some reason, I was part of the answer to this simple question. This is what he had to say.
JP, people will come and say, but what are you going to do with the land? Such questions. How do they evoke your emotions, and how would you respond to such questions?
Well, I've often seen that on social media. There is a young lady, I think, concerned citizen. She talks quite a lot about land. And I listened to her once, and what put me off was the Model C accent.
Firstly, you say that I, Katlego from Citizen Concerned, talk a lot about land, and then you say you have only listened to me once. How then can you sit there and say I talk a lot about land when you've only watched one video of mine? Does that make any sense? Makes me wonder if Judge Hlope ever actually watched any of my videos before this interview on the EFF podcast, or if he first heard about me when they were preparing for the interview. Secondly, instead of listening to the facts and evidence provided in the video, you, a judge who knows better than most about the value of evidence, decided to not listen because of my Model C accent. Is that what we have become? A society that judges people not by the content of their character, not by the measure of the truth in what they say, but rather by their accent. I wonder if my accent would have been such a deterrent and disturbance if it was used to sing the praises of the EFF and their policies. I just wonder. In the apartheid days, black people were discriminated against by some white people because they looked different from white people. And in these democracy days, some black people are discriminated against by black people because they sound different from some black people. I wonder, with that kind of thinking, were you even able to rule on all cases based on truth rather than the accents that people had? That is probably one of the most immature comments I've ever heard and continue to hear from a lot of EFF supporters, by the way. You were supposed to dispute what I said, but instead you failed to do so and you attacked my accent. What I find interesting is that while you guys hate that my mother sent me to a school where English and Afrikaans were taught and that I speak in this non-black way, you yourselves hang out with non-black friends. Some of you even date and marry non-black people, play golf and go for brunch with non-black people. You like non-black brands, make deals with non-black people, and some of you even have non-black bodyguards. To make it even worse, some of you send your children to schools full of more white people than the school I was sent to. Your children grow up surrounded by white people, talking like white people.
The feisty politician softens up when he speaks of his 7-year-old. Malema says Ratanang is thriving.
He must be exposed to different things. He plays rugby at school, something that I wouldn't have thought of. I mean, ordinarily we think of football and doesn't know anything about football. It's rugby, it's wrestling and all those. So, and he goes to a school which was only Africans. So they just introduced now English and English lessons and all those things. But the culture is purely white Afrikaner culture in that school. And he seems to be enjoying it.
And after all of that, when you speak to the rest of us black people, you act like you are blacker than all of us and that we should be ashamed for anything that is not black enough in us. Oh, the hypocrisy.
You can see this is a young South African who basically doesn't know much about politics.
So the fact that I'm young means what exactly? That I'm dumb? That I don't know anything? That everything I say is wrong simply because I'm young? Is that how the world works now? And definitely I am not a politician and I do not know much about politics. I am just a citizen concerned with the way people, most of whom are old like yourself, have led this country astray. I do not waste my time concerning myself with any of their accents because that doesn't matter. What matters is facts. Facts about the policies that these people who know so much about politics have implemented and continue to implement that have led to the current status of South Africa.
My sister, Princess Mautwe, may I ask you this question? Can I ask you, TG, the following question? If I steal your computer right now and keep it to myself, can it be open to me that no, you don't need this computer, you're not doing anything about it? It can never justify theft.
Can never.
Yes. So those fellow South Africans, especially young black people, who say we can't use land are misdirected.
Firstly, I never said black people can't use land. I'm not sure which young person said that, but that was not me. Secondly, in one of the videos I made it clear that the Constitution allows for black citizens to be given back their land if that land was stolen from them. No one said that if the land was stolen, it should not go back to black people, or at least not this young person. In the same video, I explained how my family, who was forcefully moved from Walmanstal by the apartheid government, finally won the claim over that land through the Land Restitution Court of South Africa. Yet even after winning, the incompetence of our government resulted in a lot of that land falling into the wrong hands. Land was stolen from us by the apartheid government. We proved this before the ANC government court. We won, but we are still without land because of our government's incompetence, negligence, and corruption, which allows rightful owners of land to be intimidated. And so my family ended up giving up on this entire process because of the danger of violence that we saw there. My family is not the only family in South Africa to have won a claim in the Land Restitution Court, as you definitely know. You're speaking to the young people of South Africa like there is some mystery to the land issue when there isn't. Anyone who can prove that they were forced off the land can claim back their land and win using the court system. Why are we so fixated only on the land expropriation without compensation when there is this legal route of making land claims? Why don't we address the incompetence and corruption in our current government that hinders black people who have valid claims, valid land claims, from actually getting and using their land? Let's put it clear. If someone was forced off their land, there is a way to get that land back without compensation, and that's through the Land Restitution Court. We don't have to wait for the EFF to change our constitution to permit land expropriation without compensation. Many lands have been given back already, but the government has failed to prepare for and facilitate those restitution processes. Some people don't even know that their lands have been returned to them.
3.5 million South Africans were forcibly removed from their land as a result of the Native Land Act of 1913, which effectively reserved 87% of land in the country for the white minority. One community that lost their land only to regain it through a land claim is the Kugas community. Now, this community is scattered in South Africa, and some are not aware that their land claim has actually been approved.
The land claim has been done 2007.
Yeah.
It has been approved 2008. Some fraudulent stories has been involved in the land claim with the approval.
Okay, so it's been approved. What kind of land is this land we're talking about that you've actually claimed it can be cultivated?
Yes, it was an agricultural land before. As I'm speaking to you, the land is vacant.
In the introduction, I said that a lot of the community who are scattered around South Africa are not aware that this land has been reclaimed. So is this a way of trying to spread the message and to say,
exactly,
guys, we've got our land back, come home and let's work on it? Is that what you're trying to do? Exactly.
I have tried last year, August. Unfortunately, I failed to get them together. I only got like 1% of the people.
That's the government for you. And these are facts. We can't focus on nationalizing all the land when we are not properly handing over the land that has already been rightfully claimed. Why don't we put efforts into ensuring that there are adequate checks and balances in place, processes that ensure that when Black people come to make land claims, their claims are checked, and once they win the land claim, their land is properly given to them, title deeds and all? Why is there no education and training going to new farmers to help them use the land well? One thing that we cannot avoid is the role of the ANC government in all of this. They fail to openly address how they seek to give land back to Black people post-apartheid. They failed to make it clear to every citizen that the land claims route is available for everyone whose land was stolen from them. They failed to ensure that after citizens win the land claim case, they get to occupy their land without intimidation, without issues. They failed to hand over all the more than 6,000 farms that they bought from white farmers. Some of those farms are unoccupied, and on the occupied ones, they failed to adequately train and equip those Black occupiers. These are the things that EFF should have been fighting for, but instead they want to target a specific race. These four failings of the ANC government have given power and rise to Marxism, socialism, and nationalization of land suggested by the EFF. I mean, can we blame South Africans for rallying behind the one party that seems to be willing to speak about the important land issues openly and boldly? No. Can we blame South Africans who are unaware of the route available to them to get back their land through the Land Claims Court? No. Can we blame South Africans for wanting to support a party that carries the danger of destroying the country through socialism, communism, and nationalization? No, we can't blame them. We can educate them of the facts. It is through educating them and sharing these facts with them that we can hopefully open them up to the avenues available to them and steer them away from voting for policies that stand to endanger our South Africa even further. Another thing that I find interesting is this. The EFF does not toy to President Cyril Ramaphosa regarding the farms that have been bought by the South African government. Those farms were bought in order to be given to qualifying Black people. But where has that gone? We know EFF to protest about things that they deem important and beneficial for Black people. So why are we not seeing protests regarding the fact that the government bought more than 6,000 farms, but the handover to Black people is not taking place? Does anybody know the reason for that? Before 2003, the South African government already had more than 3,100 farms. Between 2003 and 2022, the South African government bought more than 2.9 million hectares of land. That's more than 6,000 farms in total. The farms had equipment and housing. The Comrades have looted some of the equipment, and the majority of those farms are failing to produce enough to feed the number of people they were previously feeding under white ownership. They are failing to reach commercial production. The new farmers are now engaged in subsistence farming. Yep, they farm and eat and go to sleep. If it doesn't rain, then they will need to start begging. And it is no fault of their own. It is again the fault of the ANC government, throwing these Black farmers into the deep end to run farms without adequate knowledge, without adequate experience, without adequate equipment. They know how to plant, water, till the land, and weed the crops, but they have not been given training on management, on planning, or negotiation. Some of these farmers never receive funding. Why all these issues? Because of our ANC government. What about discipline? A lot of the farmers are taking either the funding or the money received from selling produce and buying AMGs and G-Wagons. When it is time to farm again, they have no money to reinvest into the farm. Imagine how many black people don't have food to eat because the farm that they used to be employed by can't employ them now. So when you consider all of that, was it really to the benefit of black people to change the ownership of those farms? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. When we say that corruption is destroying lives, we really mean it. When we say beware of the comrades, we really mean it. I want you to think about this. We have just discussed how the South African government managed to buy 2.9 hectares of farming land from 2003 and 2022. That land was purchased for a total of 12 billion rand. To show how the ANC is the most rubbish government South Africa could ever ask for, think about the bailouts that were given to state-owned entities under the ANC government and how many farms could have been bought for black people using that money. Denel received a 3.4 billion rand bailout. Transnet got a 2.9 billion rand bailout. PRASA spent 2.7 billion on trains that could not even fit South African railway lines. Ace Magashule with the Guptas looted money that was meant for the Vrede dairy farm, 280 million, and some of that money was spent on the Gupta wedding. Ace Magashule again facilitated the looting of 250 million rand for the asbestos project in Free State. Eskom has received 242 billion rand in bailouts from the government. These entities should be making a profit, but they need handouts from you and I as taxpayers. Let's not forget the 246 million rand that was spent on Jacob Zuma's house. Add the 52 million rand that Julius Malema got from Limpopo in his days as the ANC Youth League leader. Add all of that together and what's the total? That's at least 260 billion rand lost because of corruption. And that's just scratching the surface. Now, since 12 billion rand managed to buy 2.9 million hectares of farmland, how much land was 260 billion rand going to buy? That's at least 64 million hectares. They could have been able to buy up all the commercial farming land in South Africa. All of it, because commercial farms are about 46 million hectares. So you tell me, is this really about land or not? Is this really about giving black people farms or not? Share your thoughts in the comments section, please. To show you how bad their performance was, the ANC Comrades had planned to buy at least 30% of South African farms by now. But from 1994, the farms they have managed to buy don't even reach half of their own target. Imagine setting your own target, taxpayers give you all the money you need to buy everything you need, and still you fail to even reach 50% of your own target. That's why I ask you all to not vote for the ANC. The EFF should go in doi-doi regarding this nonsense by the ANC and get that resolved instead of wanting to get us all into even deeper nonsense through expropriation without compensation and nationalization of assets. The sad and scary truth is if the government had bought all those farms up, based on what we know about them now, we know that we could have died of hunger by now. Bear that in mind as you toy with the idea of the nationalization of farms. The EFF wants to do socialism, but we have seen the dangerous and often deadly unintended consequences resulting from a government involving itself in farming activities. In case you have not watched those videos or have forgotten, please allow me to show you a pattern here. Let's start with Russia's Joseph Stalin, a man loved by socialists everywhere. Stalin, just like Malema wants to do here, started to implement collective farming. He said it was a way to free poor people from the people who owned farms back then. And just in case you didn't know, Russia was also an empire, just like the Britain empire that EFF members hate so much. Through Stalin's nationalization of all farms and collectivization, many poor people who were told that nationalization of farms was for their benefit suffered in many parts of the Russian Empire, including Ukraine. Ukraine, which was part of the empire, lost up to 7 million people because of hunger. Go read about the Holodomor. In all of Russia, aka the Soviet Union, up to 11 million people died. That's nationalized farms for you. And it doesn't mean that Stalin set out wanting to kill his people. No. He saw that many people in his country were poor, and without doing enough research and planning, he believed that nationalization and collectivization was the way. But he later saw the very unpleasant, unintended consequences, which I am sure no South African citizen or even EFF member or supporter wants to see in South Africa, right? Now let's look at China. When Mao Zedong of China came to power, he was directly influenced and funded by the Soviet Union, aka Russia, in order for him to start his own Marxist society or Marxist socialist country in China. And so that's what he did. Like Stalin, he nationalized the farms, and more than 40 million people died of hunger there. He did not only nationalize farms, but everything, including mines. So instead of mines being run by people with expertise, they were given to just ordinary citizens who, out of fear of being said to not be producing enough from the mines, ended up burning farming tools to increase the output from the furnaces. I'm not lying. Take a look at this.
He wanted to double the steel production from 5.35 million tons in 1957 to 10.7 in 1958, the first year of the Great Leap Forward. Mao instructed the people to smelt all their scrap iron, from cooking pots and woks to farm tools. Steel fever swept the country. Those who stayed on farms were encouraged to make steel rather than work their farms, which meant many crops were left to rot in the fields with no one to look after them. And all for nothing. The steel produced was of such poor quality it was useless, and later secretly dumped. Despite this, Mao wanted the policy to continue.
I know that when they try to convince us that socialism and communism work, EFF and others tend to direct us to China and its current success. But don't be deceived. Beware. China's success is as a result of stopping socialism, stopping nationalization, and allowing capitalism, aka free markets and foreign investments. These only started after Mao Zedong's death, because during his life, although many saw that his communism ways were destroying everything, they dared not say anything out of fear of what would be done to them by the dictator. So after Mao Zedong's death, the new leader named Deng Xiaoping sought to truly grow China. Instead of going to Russia for lessons, he and Chinese officials took trips to learn from Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. They copied Singapore's model, and today look at China, one of the most capitalist and the most successful countries on earth. So when the EFF talks, they don't tell you that capitalism is why China is successful. They intentionally forget that nationalization of farms, mines, and means of production, along with socialism, died when Mao Zedong died in China. And economic growth was experienced after that death, as can be seen on the graph on your screen. Again, I don't think that Mao Zedong intended for his decisions to result in the death of his citizens, but these were the unfortunate, unintended consequences of nationalization. You know what? For good measure, let's add Malema's favorite country to ever seize the land, Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe. Mugabe nationalized the farms, and in line with the hypocritical tendencies of the socialist leaders, while the citizens of the country owned no adequately sized farms, he and his closest allies, aka Comrades, had more than one farm. In fact, Mugabe himself had more than 10 farms, his wife too. The rest of the black people in Zimbabwe were given small little plots the size of football fields. Imagine a massive farm that used to produce enough to feed provinces gets cut up and divided to cater for hundreds of small farmers who use handheld tools. Most of those farmers are exactly what you and I will be if we fall for and support the EFF's plans: a subsistent farmer or subsistence farmer. And based on previous comments, I know someone is watching thinking it's fine. As long as I have the land, it's fine. As long as I have the farm, it's fine. I will finally have dignity. Let's consider our Zimbabwean brothers and sisters. Did the nationalization of farms result in their dignity? Right now, a lot of Zimbabweans actually need help just to eat. They have the land, but very few farms are as successful as they used to be. Very few farms are as successful as they need to be in order to feed their families adequately. Many have left their plots of land and are in South Africa working as drivers, domestic workers, waitresses, securities with land. Don't be sold a pipe dream, dear Black South Africans. As usual with any socialist corrupt government, the politically connected get the biggest farms, the most supplies and equipment. Zimbabwe gets help from China, they get help from Russia, but it's not enough. Why? Because the problems are too many. It's never just about the land. The climate is changing and is doing whatever it wants. Who knows when it's not going to rain? Unfortunately, in the excitement of land expropriation without compensation, not much thought was given to the need to dig boreholes, do irrigation, build small lakes on the farms. Now, as a result of the short-sightedness of the socialist leaders and their followers, there are several unintended consequences, one of which is America sending Zimbabwe food from time to time. That same America that socialist leaders will have you blaming for every wrong thing in Africa. Look at this.
Receiving the food aid from USAID in Harare this week, WFP Zimbabwe says the assistance will cover 230,000 people first.
This assistance is critical for many people across the country. We appreciate USAID's $11.3 million contribution on behalf of the American people as we seek to support families in Zimbabwe.
USAID has been working with WFP Zimbabwe since the year 2000 to improve food security for millions in Zimbabwe. Once one of Africa's bread baskets and a food exporter, Zimbabwe has heavily relied on assistance from donors to feed its population in recent years.
Besides hunger faced by the rural population, Zimbabwe is also facing a long-running economic crisis that is underpinned by the depreciation of the Zimbabwean dollar. And it also faces high unemployment, shortage of fresh water, shortage of electricity.
So like I said before, skills, knowledge, finance, experience are all very vital. Without them, the country will starve. And Judge Hlope knows this very well. Here is what he had to say regarding that.
My view is simply this. It doesn't help to give a farm to Mr. So-and-so or so-and-so simply because he is a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. Farming is very, very involved. You need to capacitate our people.
Yeah.
Transfer of skills is very, very important. And I regret 30 years down the line after independence, there hasn't been much transfer of skills. And I think if you just take a community and say, here is your land, have it back, you are setting people for failure. There is a farm that I know, for example, in KZN, they asked me to assist. They want to convert it into a game farm. The community there got 5,000 hectares of land. Of the 5,000 hectares of land, 3,000 hectares has already been leased back to the whites who lived there before.
Exactly. Yeah.
They are carrying on because they've got the skill, they've got cattle, they've got sugar cane. So when I got there, the this community asked me they want to start a game farm. So they gave me the 2,000 hectares that I could work with. But obviously, I don't want to go much into those details. It was very clear to me that they were set up for failure. And I ended up asking them questions. Why are you leasing back these sugarcane farms back to whites. Their answer was, what are we going to do? We don't have the capacity. They have the skill, they have the money, they have the know-how. So my view is this: it's not helpful to give the land back to various communities without capacitating those communities, without the transfer of skill. I'm just using farming as an example. Mining gets more complicated. Right?
What more can I say? If you watch my videos, that is exactly what I was saying. EFF wants to take all the land even though they don't have adequate skills, even though most of us as citizens don't have adequate skills. And do you expect that the person from whom you took the land without compensation will gladly share these skills with you? I don't think so. The unintended consequences will be begging for food just like Zimbabwe, running away to other countries just like our brothers and sisters from Zimbabwe, or God forbid, death like was seen in socialist Russia and China, all while the leaders who led them to this place are living well. Zimbabwean farms are not failing because there is something wrong with the Zimbabwean brothers and sisters. No. Apart from the reasons I've touched on above, it also has a lot to do with the economies of scale. Dividing the farms into small plots affects a very important aspect of commercial farming, and that is the economies of scale. Simply put, the economies of scale is that the larger the farm is, the more efficient it is or it will be for them to produce more products. The average cost to produce each crop will be reduced, which allows them to produce more crops, which reduces the price of each product. It is a luxury that smaller farms do not enjoy. Please just go do some reading about what the economies of scale are. And EFF, please don't come here to say we never said we'll divide the farms up. You're saying you want to give people the land to work. So what does that mean? You're going to divide up the land for small holdings. If you don't do that, then it simply means that you seek collective farming, which will result in subsistence farming. An 11-hectare farm could be employing many people, but because of socialist mindsets and policies, you think subsistence farming is the right direction to take. Instead of allowing people to farm and produce at large commercial scales, you would rather we move backwards. Do you remember the status of farming in Julius Nyerere's Tanzania?
He tried to impose his vision of an egalitarian, socialist society by authoritarian methods. By government edict, a majority of Tanzania's population was grouped into villages, whether they wanted to be or not. As with so many other communal agricultural schemes in various nations and eras, those in Tanzania led to peoples doing as little work as possible on the communal crop and as much as possible on their own individual plots. Tanzania's output per worker declined over a period of a decade, and the country went from being an exporter of maize to being an importer. Hundreds of nationalized firms went bankrupt. The railroad from Tanzania to Zambia broke down so often that the Africans who ran it were replaced by Chinese at virtually all levels.
Also, why are we focusing on farming like it's the only thing South Africa can or should do? Farming needs to be handled by a few people in the country. As a country, we need to specialize. So if the land gets divided up into these small farms where we do subsistence farming, who is going to build? Who are going to be the teachers, the doctors, electricians, engineers, and many other professions? It's all about specialization. Let each of us become good at what we do and innovate. Go and do to President Cyril Ramaphosa and tell him to start being productive with the 6,000 farms that they bought with our tax money.
So where did we get it wrong, JP? That to this day, we still haven't expropriated land without compensation, that's one. But two, for those farms whose government have given back to the community, they lie dormant now. Nothing is happening in those farms.
Yes.
Because government has not had a deliberate effort or attitude to assist those communities. As you know, back in apartheid, there used to be
capacitated,
capacitated financially and equipment-wise and skills to farm And, but that's not happening with the government of the day. So where did we go wrong?
Sorry. Before I answer that, I've just remembered another category of land that can be expropriated without compensation. What happened in 1994, a lot of farmers who had loans using the land bank, which was in place, stopped servicing those loans. Right? But they live on those farms. You have a car, my sister, if you don't pay for your car, the bank will move in and confiscate you.
Yeah.
But they are staying on those farms, that's their farm. So if we were to have proper audit, we'll be able to identify those farms. That's land that belongs to the state. Nobody can deny that. If you don't pay for your house, the bank will move in, you foreclose. Why can't those farms be confiscated? You don't need to compensate them.
Well, those must definitely be identified and repossessed. Those are thieves, and that issue needs to be addressed separately. Simply go through the records and identify people who are not paying for the land. Why should a person who is not paying his debts be lumped up together with someone who paid for his farm fair and square? Imagine working your whole life and finally buying yourself a nice piece of land for the EFF to come and tell you you don't own this land anymore. We're now all going to own it together, only to later give it to Comrades Shibambu or someone just like that. Dear South Africa, I need you to understand me very well. The reason why life in South Africa is actually still very good in comparison to the majority of African countries is because Nelson Mandela took power. He didn't follow communism or socialism when he took that power. He did not do what many of the African countries did. Socialism is why most African countries collapsed. Let's do our research. Thank God we have some former EFF members who have started to see reason. They are beginning to abandon the EFF and coming to the side that wants capitalism, free markets, and innovation. The side that wants a successful South Africa. And hey, if you have woken up from the EFF cult, feel free to let me know in the comment section and say, I am free. I hope more people listen beyond my accent and get to hear the facts and evidence I share. Thank you for being here. I'm Katla Ramwari. This is Citizen Concerned. Now more than ever, please beware of the comrades.